Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Southern School District Board of Trustees meeting. Thank you all for hanging in there with us, and apologies for starting a few minutes late. All right, a recording and/or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, which may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. I will now take the roll. Brian?
Here.
Vladimir?
Present.
Jim?
Here.
Here. Stella? And I, Shelley, circulated here as well. Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have any students who'd like to lead us in the pledge tonight? Please, you're welcome. All rise, please. Oh, sorry, you should say that.
I stand allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everyone. All right, would any board members like to provide comment on tonight's agenda? No? Okay. Then may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Thank you, Vladimir. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Stella. Motion to approve tonight's agenda as presented by Vladimir, seconded by Stella. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Motion passes. Closed session report. No action was taken in closed session tonight. Superintendent's update. Yes, McGonagall.
Thank you. I have a few things to share. Today was the kickoff of our month-long STEM events across all of our schools. Today, Block hosted, am I correct? Yes, our junior high career STEM events through our science classes. Tomorrow, that is happening at Egan. Tomorrow night is our STEM career night. And if you haven't been in the past, we always get phenomenal speakers to talk about their interesting career development over time in the different STEM and STEAM areas. So I suggest that 7 o'clock tomorrow night at the Egan, probably in the multi is my guess. And then we have our STEM Expo starting pretty much now through the month of February across our elementary schools. I want to thank Grace Choi out of our CNI office who kind of leads the charge for this. And we have many parent volunteers who are helping across all 9 campuses to make sure that our kids have a really interesting experience when thinking about careers and STEM. It's been fabulous. In the last couple of weeks, we have visited 3 school sites in different configurations with trustee visits. So we've made it to Oak, we've made it to Almond to walk through classrooms. Thank you for those of you who were able to come along with me. Last week, we also made it to Egan to look outside of classrooms at facilities and just at the campus itself. I will continue to put those opportunities in my weekly update to you, so you know when you can tag along on a visit. I know teachers love to see the trustees in their classrooms and to know that you care and pay attention to what's happening across our school sites. Tomorrow we have our new communications consultant, Lynette White, coming. She'll spend the morning with us in our leadership team meeting. We're going to start with a school visit with her over to Santa Rita, and then I'm going to spend some time with her talking about kind of the next 2 months, what projects we have for her that are on tap, and then we're planning to have her come in March to a board meeting. Do I have the date right, Carrie? In March. That way she'll have a little bit of time to get to know our school district, but we're really excited to be working with her and to do a better job communicating with our staff, with our parent community, and talking about the great programs we run for kids. So that's great work. And then just a reminder that I will be at the Superintendent Symposium down in Monterey, which is the convening of all superintendents across the state of California this Wednesday through Friday. Yeah, and I always bring back, new exciting ideas. That's it for now.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, school presentation, the best part of our meetings. Block is doing a presentation tonight. Should I turn it over to principal?
Yeah, welcome, Mr. Spinader.
All right, Thank you.
Really
Room.
loved it.
Usually when I present, the boardroom is just packed. But good show tonight. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, members of the school board, especially welcome to Jim and Stella, with an esteemed body. And really, as an administrator in the district, I appreciate this board immensely. So thank you. Gives me great pleasure tonight to present or introduce to you our students. As you know, we've been really focused on deeper learning throughout the district, and at Block, as a staff, we've kind of made making learning public, that kind of subset of deeper learning, kind of our exploratory goal this year.
Recording in progress.
Oh, what? You start over. Um,
Okay.
Where's Jessica? We'll get meet her.
I'm so sorry.
I think it's my fault. It's not, okay.
It's not you.
I'll talk a little softer or a little more away from the house. Anyway, we have been taking a deeper dive into making learning public. And really exploring that as not just students presenting their work, but making sure that what they're presenting is an authentic, relevant task. But also then taking the time to do some reflection upon their learning. And so tonight, out of our first semester architecture and interior design class taught by Miss Patty Schwann, we brought in 4 students who worked in 2 pairs of teams on a very special project that I'll let Miss Schwann kind of launch. Let me see if I can use this. Just to give you a little idea, the origin of this project came from one of our many, as you may know, principals meet with each of their teachers at the beginning of each school year to go over a professional learning plan. And so when I met with Patty, and we talked about making the goal around making learning public, this idea kind of germinated within our discussion. I'll let Patty kind of tell you where this project originally came from and where she has adapted it for her students. Essentially, students have a project within architecture design in which they have to design a home using shipping containers, right, girls? This year, Ms. Schwann put a little spin on it to make it a little bit more relevant, a little bit more authentic, and make it learning public. So I'm gonna have Ms. Schwann come up and speak a little bit about that, and then have our students present what they did.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ms. Shawn. So first of all, I just want to say how fortunate I am to be able to work in LASD, the school district, with so many talented students. So I just feel very fortunate. So anyway, I'd like to talk about this particular project. I don't know, the actual projects are over there. You could want to take a look at it later. So the project originated from just taking 3 or 4 shipping containers and then transform these shipping container into a house. So originally I had students just designing their own dream home, taking this shipping container, rearrange it. They could cut it however they wanted. So so after my PLP meeting with Mr. Spinator, we kind of brainstormed how do I make this project even more public, even try to redesign this project to give the student a deeper learning experience. So I come up with like, well, why this will be a perfect project for like interviewing a teacher or a client instead of having them designing their own. So I sent out a whole email to the entire school, both schools, and to see any teacher that will participate. I was very surprised and very happy that I have quite a lot of teachers like to participate. So they start drawing, but I have the kids in teams instead of just individual. So also if you are an architect, you're always working with another architect or in team. So I want them to have a full experience, just almost like working as a real life architect, so working in teams and then go out and interview a client. So the client will be our teacher, so yeah. And then at the end, we had a little student showcase, so I invited the school and the parents to come to see the results. That's pretty much the whole idea and the whole thing that I did was this project, so. Yeah. I think I'm done.
Thanks. So our teams tonight, and this was, I guess, by design, our two teams actually, I was their client, so they interviewed me. Did you pull my name or did you choose me? You lost the lottery. And so they'll talk a little bit about that process, but it did involve them arranging a time to come into my office. I was interviewed by both teams. And tonight they're gonna talk about their learning experience. If you wanna see their homes, like Ms. Schwan said, they're up there. But I wanna introduce them. The two teams are Jasmine and Amity, who worked on one project, and Libby and Tiffany worked on the other, and they're gonna go ahead and take you through the next set of slides. So girls, if you wanna step on up to the podium. I have the, we're on the right side.
Okay.
So, some of the skills we used when, completing this project is we had to make a skill drawing, which we just drew our the living room of our house, but we had to make it to scale, which we have these rollers for.
We also made perspective drawings or elevations of the outside and sides of the house. Which we used, so it would be scaled also to the actual dimensions of the house.
We also made floor plans, which is basically if you like took the house and then you looked at it from a bird's eye view without the room.
And we also constructed like a 3D version of the model, picture scan. And then the other skills we used were other skills not as technical, like collaboration. We had to work together with partners.
Yeah, and like really making sure we were problem solving, and because we had two people and like maybe different ideas, we would have to like compromise ideas or like figure out which one we would actually use.
We also had to work on interviewing the teachers because we actually had to go out and interview them. And we had to just use the things that they told us to design a home for them.
Yeah, and kind of along the lines of that, like sometimes you wouldn't be able to ask like every single question, or like you create questions along the way of the process. So like you'd have to infer and like think about what would work.
We had to kind of design the whole thing actual user change their experience for them. We kind of had to interview the client and kind of learn more about them.
Yeah, and making it realistic, like especially with making a house. Before this project, we hadn't made any houses. We would just make like a drawing of a room or something. But making like a house, we were restricted with like the shipping containers because they aren't like the biggest things. And also with like making a house, you would obviously have to have bathrooms, but like and stuff like that. But it's hard to remember those when so many times.
So, we also had to personalize it to the client's needs, which, as Tiffany said, you had to add bathrooms and stuff, which is obviously necessary, but you don't really think about it. And also, Mr. Spinator, he wanted a mountain bike room, which we thought was gonna be easy, but then he wanted it to lead directly to the outside, which also like really affected where, like, it limited where we could place it.
We also had to like respond to what Mr. Spinator wanted, like with his house. Like for example, we asked him if he was like an introvert or extrovert, and he said an extrovert. So me and Jasmine and I thought he wanted like bold colors and like patterns in his house. But then he actually said he wanted like a very peaceful place where he could just like relax. So we had to personalize it to what he wanted.
Some obstacles that we had to go through. It took some like determination. So I was sick for a week. So Libby had to do like a good portion of the project by herself.
It was difficult because when she came back, she was like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't have done this then. We also had to move the couch back a little bit in the perspective drawing because it just didn't work.
So, a challenge that we had to overcome was meeting the timeline, because like we had enough time, but for the floor plan, we had to like redraw our second floor and redesign it, which kind of dragged into our model time, which made it hard to meet the due date.
Yeah, we had to like reorganize the rooms on the second floor because they weren't like aligning to the measurements of the actual like the building on the like the walls of it. So we had to rearrange it, and it was, yeah, it made our model like have limited time to.
Well, they wanted me to pick a winner. And I told them I would announce the winner at the board meeting. But again, I want to thank the board here because this is the final step of making learning public and reporting out to you. Notice that we didn't really show you the project. Instead, we talked about the process of the learning, which is really what we're trying to get to. The winner is both of them. Let me explain why, okay? Amelia and Jasmine's was really great because it was 2-story, right? And really kind of fit all the different needs that I was looking for. And so I really liked that one. However, I really liked Libby and Tiffany's design because based on the structure, I could place it anywhere on the earth. Like if I wanted to find the land, so sometimes you look for the land and build that house. Sometimes you find the house wherever the land is. So I really couldn't choose honestly. They really did both win. So that's our presentation tonight, and we welcome any questions that you might have for our group, and including Ms. Schwann. So thank you.
Any questions?
Were you aware that the winner would be announced here at our meeting when we started? Yeah. Cool.
After this experience, do any of you want to pursue a career or consider a career in architecture? Okay, what?
How did you learn how to do drawings?
I guess that like one of our first projects in our architecture class, it was to create a floor plan of our architecture or like room, like the classroom. And so like we would have to measure everything like with a tape measure. And so Ms. Schwann, she would show us like and we also use like different tools. So we had, like Jasmine said earlier, like a scale ruler. So like it had it as like if 1 foot in real life, it would be a 1/4 inch or something like that. And using like rulers with right angles, then it would be easier to create like.
In perspective, how'd you get the perspective? Because I saw one of the pictures there had really nice perspective.
We kind of learned how to draw 1 point and 2 point perspectives. We only used 1 point for the project.
That's okay.
We did like a horizon line and then a vanishing point in the center, and then you had to draw all the lines pointing to the vanishing point.
Cool. Very good.
How was Mr. Spinator as a client? Was he easy to work with? Was he demanding? You don't have to answer that.
Golly. No, that was it hard.
Cause like you're always on campus, like you're always walking around on campus, so if we needed any questions,
Yeah.
then we could just ask.
Well, I think I was a great client. But because they asked great questions, and what was interesting is both teams interviewed me separately. I'm pretty sure Ms. Schwan prepped them with some questions that they needed to know, but then both teams had really good follow-up questions and started to get into, like, for example, the question of, are you an introvert or an extrovert? I was kind of thrown off by that, but then I was like, well, that's a great question. If you're designing a home for somebody, you should know that. And so we had a great conversation about that. So their questions, both teams made me a stellar client.
I love this project because of all the different skills that you had to use in science, social science, art. My dad is a retired architect. Yeah, and so I love architects, and I've always thought that it was such a great combination of science and art in a very practical way. And so I'm very excited about this. And so, and I also think, we have a housing crisis, right? And so, and they're looking at how can we use shipping containers, build homes, like tiny homes and stuff. So I don't know what you guys are doing. It sounds like a really fun project, but it has some really good real world implications. So thank you so much for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you.
Lady. Any students want to get up and leave now? You are welcome to. But you're also welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting. Totally up to you. Okay, we're gonna move on.
Leave, just so you know, don't feel badly.
But they have home.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Parents, thank you for bringing your children. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. Would any board members like to provide comment on the consent calendar? Can I take public comment first before? Is there any public comment on the consent business?
Yes.
Susie?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I'm so sorry that I'm gonna butcher your last name. OWCZAREK.
Yes.
I didn't want to write
Susie. Not phonetic. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, let me give Susie 3 minutes.
It's my pleasure. Should I use
No,
this?
that's
It's a light. Board, thank you so much for the time. I'm here actually to talk a little bit about an item on your consent calendar tonight. It's item number 4, the MOU regarding inter-district transfers between PAUSD and LASD. Before I go through some of the reasons that we would request an extension of the current and very successful MOU, I wanted to say, just as a broad picture, that the extension, if it is signed, you agree with it, extending to include grades 7 and 8 beyond the current 6th grade ending. We see it as a natural evolution of a really strong partnership between PAUSD and LASD, benefiting students and families while maintaining minimal financial and logistical impact for both districts. And I say minimal because I believe this affects a very few number of students every year. I think at Gardner-Willis Elementary, it's around 32 students currently enrolled from kinder to 6 that are actually using the MOU. So a very low number of students, but I think it affects those students to a great degree. So I would respectfully request that if signing into the consent calendar today negates the opportunity to amend the
inter-district transfer to include grades 7 and 8. If it is possible, I respectfully request that you postpone voting on that item today. As parents, just as our educators, we're very involved in our children's education and well-being. I'm a parent of a 6th grade child currently at Gardner Bullis Elementary that is using the inter-district transfer. Myself, as many others, parents that fall into this bucket, want to extend the MOU to include grades 7 and 8 for 2 main reasons. One, the structural differences between PAUSD and LASD that LASD ends 6th grade at elementary and PAUSD has a middle school of 6, 7, and 8. So if students get to experience all those wonderful things of their final year at elementary school and all those leadership opportunities, they would then have to move into PAUSD while the rest of the fish are already swimming together for an entire year. So the structural differences of PAUSD and LASD cutting off at different grades for middle school or junior high makes it a little bit more challenging for those few handful of students to move into a completely new cohort. The second area that is a bit more concerning is that puberty is a very important. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Can I request that the speaker be allowed an extra minute?
Sure, since we don't have any other speakers for public comment. Do you want to wrap up?
Yes.
Take a minute to wrap up?
It's up to the president.
We'll give you a minute to wrap up,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
but you can also email your comments to us.
Will do afterwards as well. Thank you. The second and I think more weighty issue is that puberty is a critical transition time for every student everywhere. And students who change schools in 7th and 8th grade often report higher rates of anxiety and lower levels of engagement with their new school community. So 3 real reasons why this time is so challenging: puberty and developmental changes that are going on with children at that time, increased academic and social pressures from elementary to middle school, as well as the importance of peer groups to provide a stable relationship during these years. In essence, it would be, say, 5 children from this one elementary school that are moving into an entirely new district, while that district is over 3 years moving in. So thank you, and I'll email the rest of my comments.
Thank you. Board members, would any of you like to provide comment on the consent calendar? Please. Oh, Amanda Short. You wanted to speak on agenda item F3?
Yes.
Okay.
To the LASD board, I'm a parent in the district speaking on my own behalf. Thank you so much for all your hard work serving our community. As you'll be reviewing the SARC reports, item F3, we see another great year of strong aggregated testing results for LASD. But I want to draw attention to the low performance of our special education population who have individualized educational plans or IEPs. On the test for English language arts, only 40% of these students met or exceeded the state standard versus the 90% of their non-IEP peers, a 5,000 basis point difference. And in math, a similar result, with only 46% of these students meeting or exceeding versus the 90% of their non-IEP peers. Some schools like Santa Rita Elementary have even greater differences, with only 4% of students with IEPs exceeding the ELA test. These gaps in testing for IEP students come at a time where recent or upcoming changes at the county level are deeply impacting special education advocacy, oversight, and the ability for collaboration to create the best special education programs for our students. This year, Santa Clara County implemented a new model for the community advisory committees for special education, also known as CAC SELPAs. These are groups of parents and educators that advocate for special education services for students with disabilities. Santa Clara County moved from 5 local CACs to 1 CAC, representing over 20 school districts. And this new CAC is not addressing local concerns. Many local programs that help these students and their parents no longer have a home. Previously, local CACs ran parent support groups, resource fairs, parent education events, and allowed parents to directly address their concerns with special education administrators. These CAC channels have all been stopped or minimized, which reduces the opportunity for collaboration, communication, and problem solving. As a parent from Santa Rita Elementary, I ask that the LASD board supports the request to establish a new school board committee for special education in Santa Clara County. This committee will help parents, students, and community members keep their voice heard for special education advocacy and oversight. We want to have a place to go when there are problems before things get to a point of lawsuits. We want to help solve disproportionality problems for students of color. Your support would show these families with IEPs and disabilities that you care about their voices and commitment to creating the best program possible to get the help that they need. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any board members have any comment on tonight's consent calendar?
Just one quick comment, follow up on our first speaker. I think personally, I think it does make sense to look at whether we can extend that agreement to Palo Alto. I think I would say my conversations with Sandra on this topic, I think it's not the case that approving the MOU that Palo Alto sent over will foreclose that effort. So I'm comfortable going forward with what we have to give the parents of younger kids the certainty that this program will continue, but I'm certainly in favor of continuing to work to try to extend.
Anyone else? Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented? Oh, sorry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry. I think that the second person's comments require some sort of response from the superintendent. I hope that he would come back to us at some future time as an action or a discussion item.
Yeah, there have been a lot of changes, not only to the CAC group, but to the SELPAs at large. So I'm sure bring that item back.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's very important. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Now may I get a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
Vladimir, may I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Stella. Motion to approve the consent calendar as presented by Vladimir, seconded by Stella. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. We'll now move on to employee requests to address the board. For the Los Altos Teachers Association, Alex Schroeder.
Long time no see, huh? Good to see all of you again. Thank you again for your time, and I'm gonna leave the talk of the proposal for our contract ratification to all my fellow union colleague. I'm here, in fact, to talk about a little something different. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. So I wrote it down. I really did not want to mince words with this. On behalf of LATA, I am wanting to affirm that our teachers union is at its core one that stands firmly for policies that support our students, our families, and the strength of the teaching profession. Our mission is to ensure that schools are places where both educators and children can thrive, and where every individual is safe, seen, and valued. In the current political climate, we're deeply concerned that these fundamental values are not being adequately reflected or upheld at a national level. As a union, we stand unwaveringly for the rights of all members of our community, including our LGBTQIA+ students and staff, as well as other marginalized groups. We believe in fostering inclusive environments where diversity is celebrated and not censored. We're also committed to academic freedom and the belief that censorship of educational materials is not only dangerous, but also a disservice to our students. Withholding important truths from our classrooms hinders our ability to cultivate critical thinking and informed citizenry. Education must be rooted in honesty, equity, and the pursuit of knowledge that empowers students to understand and engage with the world around them. Therefore, we respectfully ask that the school board stand with us in these efforts by reviewing and, where necessary, revising board policies to ensure that they align with the values of inclusivity, equity, and educational integrity. Together, we have the opportunity to create learning environments that truly support every child
and educator in our district. Thank you so much for your leadership and your commitment to this shared mission.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone from the California School Boards Association? Right. Moving on. For public comment. To provide public comment on an agenda item, speaker cards are to be submitted to the superintendent. Speaker cards will not be accepted once public comment begins. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Now we have community comments. This time is reserved for members of the public and employees to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board is not permitted to discuss or take action on non-agenda items, except to instruct the superintendent to review the matter further, report back to the board at a subsequent meeting, or place the matter on a future agenda. The board may make a brief comment or ask clarifying questions. I thought we did. This one? Okay, here we go. Amanda, short? Did you? No.
Here it is.
Okay.
Oh.
Great. Okay, no worries. Thank you. All right. I am closing comments on non-agendized items. Moving on to action and discussion items. First item, financial impact of proposed collective bargaining agreement and approval of the tentative agreement between La Salta School District and La Salta Teachers Association. Dr. Boston?
Evening, Melissa Powell, Chief Negotiator for the LATA, and I are here to present the tentative agreement with the association and the district.
So we wanted to start just by giving a little history because we chose to do things differently. We have been a district that has always been an interspace bargaining. And when Carrie and I met to set things up, we really wanted to go with the idea of collaboration. And so we kind of invented our own way of bargaining and did a collaborative model. And so in order to do that, we got together with our team, and we know you guys, some of you joined us at lunch, but we came up with a purpose, and we really came up with why we were doing the way we were doing it. And we wanted to really negotiate to create an environment that allowed all teachers to serve children best. Because that's why we're united here together, is we're all here for kids. We wanted to make LASD a desirable district for top quality educators that really want to come and be here and be a part of the magic that we create for children.
So with our approach, we set some goals and some intentions at the beginning. We did a joint sunshine. We brought that forward to the board. And one of the major interests in that sunshine statement was that we would be more competitive with our neighboring districts in terms of our compensation. But we also cared that the relationship continued to be a collaborative one. And so we were hard on issues like comparability and soft on people. And so tonight's outcome, we think, is built on trust, but it also moves the needle on competitiveness. So with that, we want to thank our teams. So for LATA, I'd like to thank, in addition to Melissa, Amanda Kleekman, Allison Gentile, Tracy Grinberg, Courtney Massey, Riley Hagan, Paul Ramirez, and then the CTA representative, Valerie Luke. And then Eric and Sandra and I were joined by Erin Green, Connie Collmore, Kate Skirmahorn, and then Greg Danis, who is our legal representative. So we'd like to thank them.
And then we'd also like to thank the board. We feel, both sides feel that we've been very supportive through this entire process. And we're just very grateful that you were able to hear the needs of the teachers and the needs of the students and help us continue to collaborate. We felt that this went really well. We really, everyone came out feeling like it was a win on every area. And we really look forward to continuing our newly formed collaborative model as we have negotiations in the future.
So in your packets this evening, in addition to the tentative agreement, are the AB 1200 disclosures, the approval by counties. I want to thank the business office for preparing those items together with the salary schedules. You can see we've really moved the needle, not only on compensation for our teachers in the district, but for our recruitment efforts. We've moved that starting salary as well as the top of that salary. So we hope that makes a difference for us this recruitment season as well. But happy to take any questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. And I want to thank you and your teams also for going through this process. LASD is definitely a very special place. Board members?
I have a question. On the psychologist, schedule, it says 196 days. Is that's 10 more days than, yes?
Correct,
Okay,
yeah,
all right,
they were
fine.
2 more weeks.
I just noticed that was different, that's all.
Any other clarifying questions? Okay. Are there any requests for public comment? No? Okay. Right. Would any board members like to provide comment on this agenda item? Right, well, it is an action item. So may I get a motion to approve the tentative agreement with the Los Altos Teachers Association?
So moved.
Thank you, Vladimir. May I get a,
Pleasure.
may I get a second?
A second.
Thank you, Stella. Motion to approve the tentative agreement with the Los Altos Teachers Association was made by Vladimir, seconded by Stella. Any further board discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very proud to say the motion passes unanimously. Next
Now we
agenda-
just missed the teacher. Got it. We've had a long Monday.
Thank you for coming tonight. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Initial proposals of the Los Altos School District and California School Employees Association, Chapter 103, to reopen the 2022-25 collective bargaining agreement.
Just like our LATA, we're excited to be at the table with our CSEA. We're opening compensation. We've already had one session to review our financial information, but we're excited to continue the collaborative effort and look forward to bringing you a tentative agreement shortly.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions from the board? Oh, so,
Well, just because we have some Boy Scouts in the room, I was wondering if you might want to clarify some of these acronyms, LATA versus CSEA.
Welcome. Our LATA is our Los Altos Teachers Association, and our CSEA is our Classified School Employees Association.
Thank you. Yeah, some of them have their copy. Yeah, too, so. Thank you.
any other clarifying questions? Okay. Any requests for public comment? No. Would any board members like to provide comment on this agenda item? Okay. Then may I have a motion to approve the initial proposal of Los Altos School District?
So moved.
Thank you, Vladimir. Can I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Stella. Motion to approve the initial proposal of Los Altos School District was made by Vladimir, seconded by Stella. All in favor?
Aye.
I forgot to ask this further board discussion.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
sorry. Okay,
I
no
thought you
further. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent. Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. All right, we're gonna move on to our study session, our bond program update. Board of Trustees will review the bond program and discuss next steps. Mrs. McGough.
So we're really excited to spend some time to dig in. So this is fairly unusual for us to have a kind of a new organization. We're having a study session within our regular meeting. We kind of limited the number of business items so we could get into work. Thank you, Makiko, for being here. Our goal today is that you have good information on understanding how the bond will be financed, understanding the cash flow of how the bond works when we actually issue bonds, that we perhaps get into some discussion around projects, priority projects, and understand to set some expectations of how long bond projects actually take to like get shovel in the ground or work being done on our campuses. So it's a little bit more informal. So you can stop mid-presentation, ask your clarifying questions. So we want it to kind of flow of more of a conversation. Yes, hi, Makiko, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Makiko is with Eisman Advisors, and they're the district's financial advisors, and they helped us with the last bond issuance. So we're really excited to work with Makiko for many years. Trusted advisor, it always gives a great financial advice. Just to talk a little bit about Measure EE, and kind of what the bond program would look like, and I'm gonna turn over to Makiko.
All right, thank you. So I put together a short presentation booklet. Feel free to ask me questions as we go along. So first of all, congratulations. Measure EE passed with a little over 56% of the support of the community. And there's the 75-word ballot question. The key one being the 350 million of bonds authorized. So some of you may recall this slide from the presentation that was made last March, but it is a little while, so I thought we would revisit it. When we were talking about how to size this new bond measure, we looked at various assumptions that drive the bond model. Assessed valuation is one of the key elements, as well as borrowing rate and the number of bond series and the timing of bond series. And if we recall, because of the need from a capital facilities perspective throughout the school district, we opted to go with something a little bit more optimistic in terms of assumptions to increase the size of the bond authorization. Instead of compared to the baseline, we went with a slightly higher assessed valuation growth, a little bit of a lower borrowing rate than a baseline scenario. And in terms of bond series, the baseline case usually assumes 3 series of bonds issued every other year. And in this case, for Measure EE, we assumed 4 series of bonds issued every other year, 25, 27, 29, and 31. So why are bonds issued over multiple series? Actually, there are a lot of different reasons. First, issuing the bonds over multiple series and over multiple years allows your assessed valuation to grow over time. I actually have a graphic on this on a later slide, so we'll talk about it a little bit more. Another thing we keep our eye on is the statutory bonding capacity. The statutory bonding capacity isn't really a significant constraint for Los Altos School District, but it is still something that we want to keep our eye on. The third bullet, we want to mitigate the interest rate risk to a particular market. So by issuing the bonds over multiple years, you spread out that interest rate risk. This is similar to the concept of dollar cost averaging for investments, if you're familiar with that. The fourth bullet, tax law requires that the district have a reasonable expectation to spend down 85% of bond proceeds within the first 3 years after some bonds are issued. And so for most school districts, it's not reasonable to expect that you would be able to spend down 85% of 350 million all in the first 3 years. And then the last bullet, just conceptually, right? When you're borrowing money to buy a house, you don't buy it 5 years ahead of time because you are incurring a bunch of interest when you don't need that until the moment you purchase it. So in the same token, I mean, it doesn't work perfectly, but we want to time the bond issuance closer to when the district needs the money. And so you don't want the taxpayers to start incurring interest expense if you're not going to need some of the funding until 5 years from now or 6 years from now. All right, so as promised, this is the graphic. It's assuming multiple series of bonds. So each of the bars, the colors are as distinct here as they were on my computer screen, but each series of bonds layers on top of each other. The red bars, the red line represents the projected revenue with that $30 tax rate, the $30 per $100,000 in assessed value. And you can see that by layering on the series, issuing the series over multiple years, we're allowing the projected revenues to grow.
Guys, the question
Sure.
about the slide. Does the sort of shape of the curve for each series, is that set like on day one of the bond program, or is like the curve for each series kind of gets set when it's time to issue that series? Because this, I'm assuming, is the red line, I think, is based on sort of the 4% property tax growth rate that was a couple of slides ago. So if that goes up more steeply, can the other series shape then change?
Yes, so this is the original plan. And as time goes on, we're gonna have every year in July, the county gives us the updated assessed value. And so we'll update this model every year. And so whenever there's a new bond issuance, we actually structure the bonds to match the assessed value that we have at that time. You know, here, even in 2032, there's gonna be a lot of projected AV growth over time. So there is a lot of projection that still goes into it, but yeah, to the extent that in the first 8 years or so, we're gonna have actual AV before we issue the bonds, we'll incorporate that into the model. And that could allow you to accelerate the bond issuances more than the original plan, or conversely, if AV growth isn't as high as what, you know, we anticipate, it could mean a delay in issuance. But that's a great question. This is really the original plan.
Well, and then, sorry, I guess one more question. If the AV growth then goes the other way, like what happens if we're 10 years out, we've issued all the bonds and then that line doesn't go up the way we expected it to, and, you know, dips under the.
Yeah, I mean, that happened around the 2010 timeframe where there were some communities that saw a significant decrease in their assessed value. And for some of those school districts that have already issued all their bonds, there is, you know, not very many tools you have in order to restructure existing debt. It's really just a refunding. And if the interest rate environment or your call features on the bonds don't allow for that, it just means that the tax rates will float up because the tax base has gone down.
Okay, but there's no sort of clawback or consequence or directly?
No, not directly. It doesn't, you know, become something where now you have to pay anything in excess of the $30 as a district, you know. Let's see. Is there anything else I wanted to- all right, so I'll move on. Statutory bonding capacity, that was the other constraint that I mentioned earlier. You know, here it shows that the district currently has a net bonding capacity of 312 million, which is pretty significant. It still means that you wouldn't be able to issue the full Measure EE. The statutory bonding capacity, net statutory bonding capacity increases typically from year to year as your tax base grows and also as you pay off some of your outstanding bonds. So I'm not concerned about statutory bonding capacity, but it is something that we want to keep around. All right, so history of assessed value, you know, we wanted to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of our assumptions than the baseline cadence of 3.5%. We do believe that there was a strong basis to do that. This is the history of assessed value going back to 2007. And you can see on average, assessed valuation has grown by over 6% per year. So we believe that our assumptions are still fairly conservative. And to Trustee Johnson's point, we're hoping that we'll be able to implement this a little bit better than the original plan. So in terms of a potential A issuance schedule, this is just very preliminary. But based on the original financing schedule, the Series A bonds would have a par amount of approximately 90 million to be issued in 2025. We would be on track to issue potentially in early July. What we like here is the ability to get on the tax roll starting in year one, which means that the district would be able to start repaying bonds immediately in the first year. We are going to be back in either case in the springtime, as you've done in the past, in terms of passing a tax rate resolution. And so that's something that is going to definitely happen. The rest of these items are to be determined based on project needs and what the board's direction. I think that might be it. Yeah, so I'll pause there to see if there is any additional questions.
A couple of questions.
Okay.
Go back to slide 3. The last line there, if I'm not mistaken, that's actually not possible, right? Because that would $362 million of bond. We only authorized 350, right?
That's correct. Yeah, this
Okay,
is.
so that's why you have the yellow, the green outline.
Yes, yes, and I wanted to kind of show the board different, you know, effects of different assumptions on the potential total bond proceeds.
How confident are you about the, estimated borrowing? rate?
That's a good question.
We
You
have
know,
a new, president this year. I wanted to remind you.
yeah, I mean, we are experiencing quite a bit of volatility in the market. If you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, that is gonna be pretty aggressive. Over the last week and a half, we've seen interest rates go down, so it's going to be
Which interest rate, 10-year bonds?
the municipal market index, yeah, like today, we had improvements about 0.07%, which doesn't seem significant, but that's a pretty significant, single day movement. Over the last week or so, we've probably seen a cumulative of 0.1%. In addition to that, so a pretty significant shift downward.
Do you think it makes any difference that California is one of the favorite states of our president?
I don't think so. Well, investors still have a pretty significant preference for California. When we price bonds, we compare the borrowing rates against the national, what we call the MMD index. And that MMD index represents what a AAA rated issuer, a state issuer, can borrow at. And what we've seen recently still, especially in the first like 10 to 15 years, is that California bonds are pricing through that. So we're borrowing at lower rates than what the national AAA, meaning that investors are still very interested in buying California bonds. Will that change a little bit over time? I think, there is some concern about the LA fires, what kind of impact that might have on the state budget. So, the market always shifts every day. So I can't promise you that, this favorable, the investor preference will continue, in the long term, but currently we're still seeing an advantage for being California.
On slide 4, you talk about, different tranches, different series there. Are we gonna need any bond anticipation notes?
We did not plan for a need for bond anticipation notes.
Eric?
I'm not planning on having to do this.
Okay, all right, good.
Well, actually, can I ask a follow-up question
Sure.
on bond anticipation notes? Because I was wondering, because we did that for Measure N,
Yes.
but thinking back, I wasn't clear whether bond anticipation notes are something that you can do sort of above what otherwise above the $30 per hundred, or whether sort of the bonds you issue plus the bond anticipation notes you issue still have to stay under that $30 per 100,000 threshold.
So a lot of times, school districts issue bond anticipation notes when you are constrained either from that Prop 39 tax rate perspective or from the bonding capacity perspective. It is a risk because when you have to take out that band, you want to make sure that you have the ability to issue long-term bonds. And so if you don't have that bonding capacity and you're just kind of hoping that things will work out 5 years later, that's obviously a risk. And so when we design new bond programs, we typically do not anticipate using any bond anticipation notes. There is always a possibility that the district experiences a decline in assessed value or some other issue where we want to consider that, but at this time, that's not part of the financing.
What is the limit on, so we passed a bond, Measure W, right? What's the latest that we can issue a series in that?
That's a great question. The authorization actually never expired.
Oh, okay, great. Yep.
However, the purchase power, and Eric is probably gonna be saying this more than I would, but what we always hear is that, the more you delay, the purchase power of that money declines in return.
If you go to
The key also, I mean, you only want to issue the bonds when you need the money, but you don't want to wait forever. Because the purchasing power declines, but then also, you want to pay off the debt as soon as you can to the taxpayers as well. So you want to get those things going. So it's really two things.
on slide 5. I think Brian touched on this a little bit. So what happens when that red line sort of droops down somewhat? What's our game plan there? You just delay the issuance of the bonds? Is that what I understood?
Yeah, there are a couple of, usually, I hope we don't get to that. And, historically, right, it seems very unlikely. But, I'll just go back to 2010 where we saw a lot of declines in assessed value. And there were a number of options. One is to just simply delay the issuance of the bonds. Two might be to try to do some refundings to restructure existing debt service to the extent that you can do that. There are, some requirements you need to meet in order to be able to do a refunding. Some may have issued what we call capital appreciation bonds, which compound interest over time. So you're issuing the bonds, but you're borrowing basically at a higher interest rate because you want to defer your payments as much as possible because of the dip in the assessed value. And what was the final one? Oh, bond anticipation notes could be something that, school districts could rely on to access funds. And with the hope that assessed values would recover and you'd be back to issuing long-term bonds.
And then 2062, that goes to zero. I'm assuming.
Based on this original financing, plan, yes. But if you do, if you delay your issuance for 10 years, you could, extend your final repayment term as well.
I will be well over 100. I think the last question I have is, on slide 7, you started in 2007. Why 2007?
Oh, there was no method to it was a little arbitrary after that. I think it was mainly because if I went any further, I might have run out of space.
Okay.
Yeah, there wasn't anything special there where, I did want to include the last market downturn, however, because I think that's important to see, even during the last market downturn, the assessed value in the district only went down by a percentage. I think when we saw the significant decreases in assessed value were school districts where there were a lot of new developments. And, those newer houses tend to be more impacted in terms of reassessments.
I do have a comment, not that, on the next slide. Actually, I take that back on slide 11, which is the tax rate comparison there.
Oh, yes.
Some of those, I don't know which ones are probably unified school districts. And so they may be, it may not be, was that all the?
They're all elementary.
Yeah, okay, all right. I withdraw my comment.
Yeah, we made sure to take out the, any unified or high school districts, but to your point, the total tax burden on any of this could be slightly different based on the taxes of the high school district or community college.
All right.
Any other questions?
I-
Yes, please.
I have a question.
Sure.
We need to go back to bonds for dummies. No, but in this potential Series A's issuance schedule where we potentially issue $90 million and we have 4 date. So is the idea we issue 90 million in each series until that last series and then whatever's left, or what if we change it? I mean, I don't know how that happens, but what if we said we wanted 100 million in the first year, like,
What's the flexibility?
yeah, like what? How does that throw all that off?
Yeah, so I was careful later, in that later slide to say approximately 90 million. So if Eric called and say, we desperately need 92 million, there would be no problem to make that adjustment. But the more we accelerate bonds, the more we could potentially constrain future issuances.
Okay.
And so I do want to say that there is some flexibility. But if you say, well, I want to issue 180 million, that's probably, going to be the possibility of constraining the bond program in the future. So we just think it would be, to the extent that we can kind of space out the issuances a little bit more consistently, that would be great. I would, if the district is interested in upsizing, I think it would be better to talk about that for Series B when we have a couple more years of assessed valuation growth to say, okay, well, we assumed 4%, we've got 8% growth in the last 2 years. That's significantly higher. Can we upsize Series B? So then, it's not based on, we hope the AV won't grow, but the AV actually grew. So let's adjust our plan.
We also, I'll have a slide on cash flow, but it's also based on what our needs are. We only want to issue when we need the actual money, because it's hard to spend all that money in one calendar year, one fiscal year. And And I'll talk a little bit about kind of the timing of cash flows.
So Eric, when you talk about, the interest that we have to repay, in terms of cash flow and stuff like that,
The cash flow, that won't impact our interest, because that'll be on the.
no, I'm saying, but you will talk about how much we have to repay over time and the cash flow.
Not on today's presentation, but once we do the bond issuance, that's when, that would be the time to bring that up.
If it's, if it's okay, when the district board approves, a resolution authorizing the issuance of the Series A bonds, there will be a good faith estimate in in the appendix that shows what the total debt service is estimated to be. So before the board approves the issuance of the Series A bonds, you will have an estimate of the interest expense.
I think I would have preferred if that were presented sooner rather than later, because at that time, then it's either we don't issue the bonds or, you know.
Can I ask a clarifying
Yeah,
question
sure.
to your question?
Yeah.
So the bond issuance is then paid by the taxpayers, but there's
Right.
no further direct cost to the district.
Agreed,
Okay.
totally agree, but I'm a taxpayer.
Sure.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Do we want to move to the cash flow slides?
Yeah,
Which this is a slide deck you did not receive in your packet.
Oh,
Yeah.
as I look for it.
Yep.
so I want to give an update, we did this a couple months ago, to kind of talk about the bond program and some of the next steps that what we're working on. We'll go to the next slide. Right now, we've got,
You have the clicker.
Right now, we have requests for qualifications for program management services. And those are due actually tomorrow, so we had a lot of FedEx deliveries today. These are firms that are gonna help us manage the program, get the program complete, that dialed in, is a list of projects. How much, we're gonna spend each year on each project, scope and sequencing, that'll all be worked out together, the team will all work together. But we'll have a outside company help us with that, and then also architects and engineers. And then staff has met once, and we're gonna reschedule another meeting probably for the end of next week to update our district construction standards. Type of carpet we should have in the classrooms, the type of light fixtures, the roofing materials and so on, all things are very common. So once we hire architects, these are the district standards, and then the architects will design these. They might have a couple different bells and whistles to a particular building or something we're modernizing, but we want the district for maintenance standards to be able to, all the toilets are gonna be the same, all the fixtures and things, and it's very easy for maintenance staff to do that, yes.
What type of staff is making these?
It's gonna be the maintenance staff and really the people that are responsible for maintaining. So we also are gonna have ground standards. The type of trees that are gonna be planted. No poison oak, right, things like that, right, so. But those are pretty common things that the ground staff say, no, we use Toro sprinkler heads or Hunter, and so the type of grass we won't have in trees and so on. Cause it's important, we want the people that are gonna be maintaining it to have a say in what we're gonna be installing, cause it's important for them. So we're working, so these are some things we've been working on. And poor Carol at the front desk, she got all these deliveries today, she had like a big doll, you bring in all these boxes, so. We'll be reviewing the request for qualifications, and then if we decide to have interviews, we'll be interviewing some of these firms in the next few weeks. We're hoping by the March meeting, we'll bring a pool of architects. And then also we'll have somebody on contract to help us manage the bond program. So those are some things we've been working on the last few weeks. So some organizing the bond program. As you know, the 10th site is a very big decision. And it will impact the entire bond program, including the cash flow. And so depending on whatever we decide the direction is to use on the 10th site, that'll impact how much we spend out there. It impacts all the other decisions are made for the rest of the 9 sites. We want to do a middle school analysis of the educational capacity of the Egan block to determine the scope and timing. If we move to a middle school model, we have some things that we want to do, the 10th site decisions. the middle school model, and site improvements. Those are the three main things we want to focus on for this program. And we want to see how many extra classrooms are we gonna need? If we don't need a ton of extra classrooms, can we move to that middle school model quicker? Get a couple classrooms built and not have to do a full build out, depending on what's our capacity of Egan and Block. And then elementary modernization, scope and sequencing. How many how many elementary schools can we do work at in a particular summer? Elementary school modernization is tricky. You want to do as much of the work as you can during the summer, so there's no impact to kids on campus. You don't want noise and things going on during the school year. And then we also will have to house them and move them out to portables, which we don't want to do. So the timing of elementary school work has to be very orchestrated, very organized. And so we're gonna have to be very detailed and have a very good plan in place before we can press play to do it all. And then we want to have a pipeline of projects. As construction is going on in certain schools, we have design going on for the next phase of projects. And then so on. And once those projects go from design to construction, now you're designing the next phase of your projects. And it's a constant pipeline of projects. And when we talk about cash flow, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is you have to have cash to pay for the projects under construction. And then you gotta have cash to keep the design going. And then the next cash is to pay for the projects that are under construction. Because the most expensive part of the project is the actual construction. The design is expensive, but so the idea is to always have a pipeline of projects. And now you're keeping your bond program progressing and you're using your bond dollars. I don't want to say too quick, but you're having things in design, you're constructing, and then you're moving through the bond program. And then as you need money is when you do the issuances based on whenever you're gonna need the most amount of money, depending on what, you could have multiple projects going on at once, but you have to have it phased in. The next slide talks a little bit about what this looks like. We could do a sample phase 1, could be middle school site improvements. We could do 2, 3, 4 elementary school modernization. So modernization would be new roofs, HVAC lighting. If we're gonna replace the lighting and HVAC in a classroom, all this drop down ceiling would be removed. They pretty much would gut the entire inside of the building. The bones would stay the same. And we would work our way from the top, put in new HVAC, heating, cooling systems, lights, technology, refresh the carpets, paints, do all that one time and do it over the course of several summers. We would need to decide how many schools we can do at once. Can we do 3 schools? And you hire one set of architects that does Egan, Block, another architect does Covington, Almond, Springer, and so on. And so you divide the work up and then you have one architect or several architects working on different projects. Makes it easier. Not everybody can juggle a lot of balls. So you want to spread the work out also to maximize efficiency. And you can get more projects done in a certain summer time zone as you can.
Which is why I'm just gonna interject that you're building a pool right now. Of
Yes.
architects and engineers, so we can distribute and have multiple projects happening at one time.
Yeah, and then the number one group we want to have on board is someone to help us get the program organized, the bond program, managing the program with us. And then getting the architects. So that's the first person that will hire architects to start the design process. There'll be other engineers, there'll be inspectors. And then the last person that we get on board, are the actual contractors, and we'll get some pool of contractors on board, but we have to get things moving in design first. And then the 10 site decisions could be part of the phase 1 of the bond program, and it could be in any order the board decides to give us direction on. And then really we want, as while all this phase 1 is going on, we're also now getting phase 2 projects into design. So when we're managing the bond program, it's constant design, programming, schematic design, construction drawings. It goes to DSA for 6 months for review. And then while all that's going on, we're getting bids and things. DSA approves the project and then we execute the project based on certain timelines. Doing the work at elementaries, we want to focus the most of the work has to be done during the summer. But if we decide we're going to install a new multi-purpose room, that could be an 18-month project to actually physically do the tear down and rebuild it. That will have to be done during the school time. Contractors in the Bay Area that have done school projects, They know how to work on active campuses. Things will be fenced off. It'll be safe. They all know how to work on campuses, so I'm not super worried about that. But it's a consideration. It's loud, it's noisy, but it's also a teachable moment. Kids see tractors, they get really excited, and so I like seeing kids get excited for that. You saw how excited they are when we did the playground out here in Covington, they loved it, right? So, but that's a sample phase one, and these are some considerations is how many projects are we gonna do at phase one, and how much will these phase one projects cost?
Thank you, Boy Scouts.
Thank you.
We learned a lot.
This is a sample cash flow, and this is just round numbers to make it easier to understand. So we still have some remaining dollars in Measure N, so that's our beginning balance. So we can use some of those dollars now to get the architects and designs going for whatever project get identified. Then Makiko talked about the first bond issuance, that's the revenue. Measure EE will be the first Series A. I wrote 25, 26. And that doesn't mean we're gonna issue it in 25. We could maybe not issue it until the beginning of 26, and it'd be based on when we actually need the money. And then let's say, just for round numbers, in 25, 26, we're gonna spend $15 million. We'll still have an ending balance of 100. That goes to the next year. We'll spend maybe 75 million of bond dollars. That leaves us with 25. And then now I know I've got some things in design, we've done some construction. I'm gonna need another bond issuance because we're gonna need more cash to start some bigger contracts, like we just signed 3 big leaseback contracts for, let's say, $60 million of construction. We're gonna need $60 million in the next 2 years. So we work with Makiko and we time the next bond series, Series B. Series B, we issue $85 million in bonds. We're gonna spend 25 the first year, maybe 75 the next year, and that's kind of how we're thinking of structuring the bond program. So we have to have our list of projects kind of identified, kind of what we think the timing of is and how much things are, it's not gonna be perfectly to the dollar, but we have to have a reasonable idea of what we think we'll need each year and work very closely with our finance team, and we'll schedule our series based on when we need the cash. And then that's kind of what, and I could keep going out now, but I just wanted to do the first couple of years, the first 2 series, so you can kind of see what we think about cash flow. If we decide to do a very large 10 site, then that will limit what we can do at the other sites. And we're gonna have to push things out the other way, or we could front load more work at the elementaries and middle school. Doesn't mean we're not gonna make any decisions down the road, but it allows us to get some work done now at some of our current sites. Then as more time comes available, we can push things out for the 10 site decision based on how big we're gonna build it and so on. Yes,
Does the 25 million include the TDR money?
it
The
does
beginning
not,
balance? Okay.
it does not.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Does the 25 million beginning balance include the TDR money?
Yeah,
No, it doesn't.
there's about 38 or 39 in there currently, but I pulled out that 10 million just to not have it shown on the balance sheet. Just
Why not?
just for purposes. Why not? Well, the TDR money is
less
unrestricted.
okay,
It's
yeah.
unrestricted, yeah. But if it was actually bond proceeds from Measure N, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Another question, Makiko. From, on slide 8 of your slides, you have the potential Series A issuance schedule. You like, okay. And April 21st and then July 2nd, we actually close on it. Does that mean that any time of day we can call you up and 2.5 months later we get money?
Yeah, it usually takes a 2 to 3 month time frame. And what's important is that we do want to get on the tax roll for Measure E for fiscal year 25, 26. And so that's why I indicated that that tax rate resolution probably will move forward, and the actual issuance of the bonds will depend on when.
Yeah, no, so what I was asking, this is sort of like in response to Eric's
Yeah.
cash flow. If we suddenly decide that we need more cash, are we constrained to issuing bonds only every 2 years? Or can we say go 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, like that, let's say?
Yeah, and so that chart where each of the series, layers on top of each other. It would be helpful to have some idea of when the next series of bonds will be, because what we typically do is to have a lot of principal maturing in the first 2 years. with the assumption that the district isn't gonna issue for 2 years. And so, if you do issue earlier, we might need to do some, what we call capitalized interest and stuff to make sure that we don't go over $30 in that first year. And so, we are not, to answer your question directly, we are not restricted in when we can issue, but it would be really helpful to know kind of a general plan or idea, since we structure the bonds with that planning in mind.
I'm sure Eric will be able to supply the
Okay.
details there.
So, let's say we wanted to stick to the every 2-year plan, but we needed an advance on the money. Would it be preferable then to issue bond anticipation notes? You know, like, cause I don't really know what the
Yeah, I mean,
consequences of
to
those
the-
are.
to the extent that we can, we try to avoid bond anticipation notes, particularly because it adds another financing. And you know, it's very much similar to issuing long-term bonds, is that you have to go through a rating process, you need to do the disclosure documents. And so, you know.
So
to the
there's no
extent
advantage to
possible-
using it
I
just to
wouldn't
get,
say it's not an advantage, but
Okay.
you know, I think depending on the project needs, we will discuss and put everything on the table to say, okay, well, how would we best meet the district's capital facility needs? So I just wanted to, I think the main objective tonight was to present the original financing plan. And I think as this plan gets more developed, we can, you know, see if we need to adjust the financing plan. And particularly, you know, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, as we get more information on AV, we'll truly be able to revisit the plan with some new data.
Since we have a couple of new trustees, hopefully you'll correct me if I get this wrong, but as I remember it, when we did the bond anticipation notes, that was because we were hoping to get the TDR revenue, which then would pay off the bond anticipation notes, and then we could issue the rest of the bonds. But the plan B, which we ended up mostly in, was needing to issue the
Yeah,
bonds to
yeah.
pay off those bond anticipation notes. So I think that's why we structured it.
That's
that way.
correct. Yeah, so the interest expense on the bands did go on the tax roll, and so, you know, it's an additional. I mean, mainly it's additional interest cost. I mean, you know, if you did issue long-term bonds at that time, you would have needed to incur interest expense on it. Still, so.
There's cost of issuance and the timing, so if you're gonna go through the process of doing a bond anticipation note, it might be more cost effective to do a regular issuance of tax exempt bonds, because it's, you're still doing bonds is a very long process, even though they keep them made it very nice, only 3 months on the little window. It's actually a lot of work on everyone's part, from the financing to bond counsel and all the disclosures, and having the board approve tax rates and things, so it's pretty important. And try to only do it when you need the money, because it's a lot of work to do it.
You have a couple more slides there.
Yeah.
Go on.
So this is just a quick, and then, what we try to do is, show, this is just a draft project list, and this is not from our district. But I wanted the board to see is when we start developing a project list, when we start putting a bond program together, we will have a list of projects, the estimated construction costs, and then we'll have construction contingency, miscellaneous construction costs, soft cost is your engineers, your architects, inspectors and things. Those are soft costs. F&E, it's furniture, fixtures and equipment, new technology, desk, chairs, things that might have come up. And then each project will have a project contingency, and we will work on our project list to develop what is a good construction contingency, 10%, 5%. If there's modernization, and when you start tearing off ceilings, you have a little bit of a higher contingency because there's like a lot of unknowns. Who knows how they built it 20 years ago? So as you know, if you've done a home renovation, you're like, oh, I didn't know that was there. And so you might have some unanticipated costs. So you do want to have some project contingency to cover those. Then we would say, okay, what's the total number of new classrooms? If it's going to be a middle school, a new school, and we would say any new program measure EE on the last column of what we're going to be using. And I might have a separate column that says measure N. Any remaining measure N funds, I would like to spend those down first, and then we would go into measure EE. There's a little project type on the side, and it talks about what type of project it is. We have modernization part of it. It could be infrastructure, what phase is it in? Is it in design, programming, where you're getting feedback to the people using the facility? And then if it's in CD, construction drawings, and then if it's in TSA review, so we'll have not only a list of projects and the estimated construction costs, but we're also gonna have a timeline of projects, because you have to visually see, we're gonna do phase one, the first 4 years, and then phase two might be the next 4 years. Once we get all the projects identified and have some actual costs that are pretty close to where we think they're gonna be, then we'll talk to the board and come back about the list of projects we're recommending, and ask for some guidance and some direction for that. And then this is, these are the estimates that were shared with the board in July. And this is the scope of a 10-site project. This talks about the fields and just doing the joint use fields with some of the design work that they've been working on the design build team with Block and Petrarchy Cooperative Techs. And it's about $33 million all in cost, and that's just for the field and gym. And then the next slide we shared last July was if it's a 500 student school, estimated cost is about $89 million plus the other $33 million. And that was in July 24 estimates. We would go back to the estimators and say, okay, what's our number this year? Bay Area construction costs are higher than any other place. So that we have to have a reasonable assumption of at least 5% escalation on cost every single year. So we do want to get moving on the program, but we want to be thoughtful, we want to have an organized bond program as well. So these are just some quick slides, just want to share, kind of remind some of the things. And then as we get our project list together, we will definitely have more sharper costs. What does it cost to manage a program? We're gonna have to hire a program manager, some sort of director of bond and facilities, or a bond program manager. I like to do the accounting in-house, so we'll have to hire my extra accounting staff, all allowed to use bond dollars for that. We're not paying our administrator salaries, but we're hiring staff to help us. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Cash flow projects, the project pipeline, any questions about this piece of it?
What are we, I'm sorry, good, stop.
Oh, I just was wondering, did you, in the example, you said modernizations at 3 elementary campuses, is that sort of like what you think the upper bound is for how many we could have simultaneously?
I might just kind of use it as an example. We could do 2 a summer, and the next 3 summers or 4 summers, we do two elementaries. And then 1 summer we do 3, or we do 3, 3, 2, or, 3, 3, 1, or.
It sounds like you're not exceeding 3 then.
I think if we had elementary school construction going on all 3 schools, like more than 3 a summer, that would be a lot of work.
Okay.
And you also have to be able to manage it. And then you have to have cash. So we can't do, $60 million of construction and over the course of 2 summers if we don't have, so we have to think about all those things as well. So there's gonna have to be a lot of planning. But then once the program is kind of planned out, it'll be much easier to manage. We have rentals, a lot of summer camps for kids. So we're gonna have to be, okay, these classroom wings are under construction and fenced off, and they're gonna be doing their stuff, and then the camp will be on the opposite side of the campus, really far away, so. But those are also considerations as well.
So the campus modernization, or the elementary modernizations we're talking about, is that basically a gut model of like every building on campus? Is that how we should be thinking about it?
Not every building, because some of them are portables that we're renting, so we wouldn't do any of those. It'd be
Right.
mostly the permanent classrooms that we own. Those would be the #1 focus, like priority.
Right.
And then if we decide, hey, we're going to remodel these 12 classrooms, we'll remodel those 12 classrooms, and we're gonna remove a portable library, install a new permanent library. That might all go on at the same time. Or we might just do the modernization of the 12 classrooms, and then the next summer we do the library or admin building or whatever we decide to do. It's all based on what makes sense.
How many choices are there for like us to make in terms of what a modernization consists of?
I think we would bring back a list of projects and say, and give you guys some numbers. I think it'd be helpful to give you some actual dollar numbers, like this is what we think it's gonna cost us to do these 5 projects and then get.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to ask is sort of like, because on one of the, slides that we've seen before in terms of the master plan budget, right? Like the modernizations across all of our campuses
Sure.
add up to a significant fraction of the money available. So I guess I'm wondering to what extent there are choices that we could make to
Scale down.
get less ambitious about modernizations. But it's not, I mean, it's presented on a line item by line item, but it sounds like in reality, you're like going in and doing everything. So it's not clear to me whether, to what extent we can try to rein in that cost.
I think, when I look at the full facility master plan, it's, over $700,000 identified needs. So $700 million. And, we have over $700 million of identified projects. And then we also have to decide how much we're gonna spend on the 10th site. So those are 2 competing factors. So we're gonna have to decide, which projects are the highest priority. Is it gonna be classroom and I think we've kind of had that meeting last summer. We identified some projects and we all felt that classroom modernization was probably the highest need for the district. And that's really going through permanent classrooms, getting rid of portables, putting in permanent classrooms, modernizing our permanent buildings with new HVAC lighting. And that was kind of our priority in kind of marching orders. But then we also have to decide some other, so the more work we do on modernization and site improvements, then that leaves us less money for other things. So we have to decide what's our biggest priority. New construction, modernization, or kind of a blend of that as well.
When is the board going to decide on the priority of the projects? Like, when is that? And I'm looking at the master plan budget, but I don't know when are we deciding that? Like,
So we can start talking a little bit about that today. I think you have one more timeline one that we wanted to
Yeah.
talk to before we get to kind of, you had given us, the previous board had given us buckets of priorities. So we can revisit those.
Before you move on, Eric, I kind of wanted to follow up on Brian's question. And it's related to my previous question. I just want to get a better sense of so let's say we're doing 3 elementary schools one summer. Is the intention to have them completed by the end of the summer, whatever modernizations we've selected, be done by the end of that summer? And then would we sort of leave open the option to go back to that school at a later point? Let's say we said, we really just want to do HVAC, roofing and lighting for the first round, get it done at these 3 schools this summer, but maybe 10 years down the road, we'll go back and do the paint and the carpet or whatever. Is that fine? Because it does seem to me like you're better off by doing carpet and roofing at the same time, right? It doesn't seem like there's synergy there, but I don't know if in your mind, you're like, no, if we're fencing off a campus, we just want to do all of the work on that campus and be done with it all at once.
Yeah, element, if we want to minimize temporary housing, if we don't want to bring in portables and have them stacked out all over the place, we would want to do as much work during the summer. So in my mind, and when we've done classroom modernization, school's out on a Thursday, the movers are there on Friday, moving everything out. You already have DSA approval 6 months prior. You have the general contractor under contract 6 months prior. They've ordered all the equipment, the lights, the HVAC equipment, because it used to be sitting on shelves. Now they have to make it and it takes longer, long lead items. You have all that ready to go. School gets out on Thursday, movers come in Friday, they start demolition on Saturday. And then they get that school done in 8 to 9 weeks, because when the kids come back in August, we have to have all the rooms opened up, ready to go. Bells, fire alarm. So when we're doing a project, when we have everything open up, DSA is gonna say, hey, you have to upgrade your fire alarm, so that will all happen at the same time. They're gonna look at our path of travel, which is the area around a building. All the concrete cannot be more than 2% cross slope, so they'll look at that. So they'll look at ADA upgrades, they'll look at fire alarm upgrades. So all of that work, we do want to do all at the same time for sure. So to answer your question, yes, that's the most cost effective. You have to do it because DSA won't say no. you're gonna come back and do the fire alarm 2 years later, and DSA says, no, you need to do the fire alarm now.
Right,
So that's gonna be, that will have to be done at the same time, but now, that's for all the buildings that are currently on campus. But to answer your question, we would do all that at the same time, carpet, everything. But then if there's a library,
That can be.
that can be done another summer, because we might do the library, remove a couple portables, and do another upgrade that summer on that campus. Now Covington, we removed some portables this last summer. Covington doesn't need a ton of like other new buildings, so that would be pretty much mostly modernization, bells, fire alarm, carpet change, HVAC lights. Then that's kind of how Covington would be handled. And then one campus might need more TK classroom work. So every campus is gonna be so different. One school might have tons of portables. Well, we need to remove those portables and put in permanent buildings. So that's gonna be the kind of the project list and discussion of how do we decide what's the priority, because every campus is different.
And I think it's fair to say that the project manager person helps us see how do all of these different pieces and needs across 9 schools and an 8-year bond program actually conceptually, realistically fit together.
Yeah.
So we can get things done in that pipeline kind of way. But I think, Shally, to your point, it would be helpful to get some direction from the board on like, what are the priorities? Eric renamed them from the last board. It was to work on modernization. You guys have talked about converting to the middle school model. There's still decisions to be made around the 10th site, but understanding kind of what those priorities are will help us work with our new team once hired to actually bring a plan to you for comment.
I have a question. You said that you were going to hire a program manager. Why is it not possible to do at least 7 elementary schools in one summer? They're gonna manage the program.
So,
Aside from the Kiko's cost.
well, it is cost. It's cost, and it's also impact to the campuses. And it's also just, even though we will have some people helping us manage the program, it's also very impactful to have work done in all 7 campuses, like all at the same time.
Why? I mean, somebody else is doing the management, right?
I'm also thinking of cash. Like, we might not be able to manage all of it. We are gonna be managing projects too. We're gonna have somebody helping us and supporting us, but the district staff will still be very involved in these projects. We have camps to worry about, all the other things that happen. Like, we might need to have one campus open, so we might have to move the Athena camp, and Bald Eagle might go to one school. And then we focus on another school's camp, we focus on 2 schools at the same time. So we also want to minimize the impact of the campus sites as well.
Yeah, my uninformed opinion is that we should do more than 2 schools or 3 schools in a summer. Constrained by available cash.
Sure. And we could do that because we could do 2 elementaries or 3 elementaries and work at Block and Egan. That's 5 schools in one summer. But it doesn't mean every school is gonna be completely torn up. We have to be very methodical, and like, if we do work at Santa Rita, we've got a lot of portables over there. We have to have a plan of where are we gonna put all these people when we tear the portables down? Because let's say we put a new building where the portables are at, we're gonna have to have temporary housing for those kids.
During the summer?
Well, if we do a new building, if we build a permanent building, that will take more than a summer.
Yeah, some of our schools have, multiple of our schools have additional new construction that is part of the facilities master plan. So some of the decision making, I think that our project manager person would help us with is understand, is it even worthwhile to modernize this particular school in phase 1 if we know we need to also do X, Y, and Z?
A totally absurd comment. in China, Wuhan, built a hospital in 2 months.
They do not have to deal with the division of state.
I have a question. And I don't mean to take us on a tangent or down a rabbit hole, but when we were talking about DSA and Stella's question. So, and you mentioned fire alarm upgrades, all the things that DSA requires. So in this group one idea, campus modernization, so if you were to go into permanent buildings. But we're fixing the fire alarm for all the buildings, even the portable ones, right? Okay,
Yeah, so if we get a brand new fire alarm, we want all the schools to have the same fire alarm system.
right.
So we'll have a standardized systems everywhere. Yeah, DSA will make us upgrade everything.
And so these costs or budgeted numbers are for like a fire alarm system or technology, classroom technology is for the whole school, even the portables, if we're doing permanent classrooms later.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I had emailed you about this earlier about like, you know, like the budget, the numbers in the budget and then the numbers in this chart were not quite the same. You said there's been some reduction in scope, including like AV. So I would like to know where we can have reduction in scope, because it sounds like some things, because they're regulated by DSA, we absolutely can't reduce, right? So I'd like to know where we can make those reductions, which is related to Brian's previous question.
Sure. Reduction in scope would be things that are like cosmetic, carpet, paint.
Yeah.
Small things like that. BSA reviews major things. They do fire life safety, which you can't say no to. They do access compliance, which is all your ADA stuff, and then structural. So anything structural related, so if we tear a roof off, they want to make sure any HVAC units we put on the roof are structurally sound. So they're going to review structural, seismic safety. They'll review access compliance and fire life safety. But they also review the energy code, which is HVAC efficiency, light efficiencies. So there's a thing called Title 24. California is one of the toughest energy codes, and Title 24 is very expensive. So all the electricity, lights, HVAC have to meet stringent energy code about everything you can imagine. So that drives up cost as well. So that's going to be a driver that we can't negotiate any of that. But paint and carpet, minor cosmetic things, DSA doesn't really look at that stuff. But when you have a classroom ripped open and it costs you more to cover and save the carpet than it would be to, you know, sometimes you're protecting the flooring. It's like, just rip it out, right? You're not gonna see, because they have to protect the flooring, and there's also a cost that they have to, you know, they put plywood down, tarps down. So all that cost is something where you could maybe just rip out the carpet. It's easier for them. Yeah.
And then. In this budget, imagining. Because DSA, I believe, when you do a project, looks for other things that you can do. Have we anticipated any additional costs for their extra projects in here?
The fire alarm is the biggest one.
Okay.
But then the access compliance, which is the path of travel.
Right, yeah.
That's where they'll really make us upgrade parking lots. So from the parking lot to the new construction, the building is called the path of travel. And they're very strict on that, and they'll really analyze that. Some school districts will have to add a lot more to their budgets, because you'll have to rip out the concrete all the way around every single building that you're doing work on to make it, and 2% is like almost flat. And so that's because if you're in a wheelchair, they don't want the wheelchair to tip over, so they want the cross slope going across this way. It has to be almost flat, and so many schools, they like having a bigger cross slope because it gets water to drain away from the building. So there's a problem with that, but access compliance, that's the code. So it's just something we have to grapple with as well. And there'll be unknowns anytime DSA, we call it the red pen. They have a red pen and they mark up the drawings from the architect. And then the architect says, oh, this is called back check. And then they hand you back your drawings with all these red things, and then you have to correct them resubmit it at back check, and then they'll say, okay, it's all fixed, and they stamp it approved, and then we could bring the contract to approval. Yeah, and that the red pen is never fun, you know, because it costs more.
Eric, what about, when we're working on a campus and we need to move the kids, like the cost of, do we need, and we didn't thought about the cost of like additional portables, or where we're gonna put those kids, or a camp school, like how much that costs?
Yeah, and we'll have to, you know, that'd be like a contingency cost. We'll have to build that into our program, so there'll be a project contingency, but there's gonna be a program contingency as well. So we might set aside of the $350 million, we might put $5 million in a program for the whole bond program. And we would have to use that money for unanticipated costs. We want to minimize temporary housing, because it's really tough to, you don't want to be using temporary housing, but sometimes it's inevitable based on the project.
And we can pay for that out of bonds.
Yes, you can. Yeah, it's part of the project. Yeah. And then I just wanted to show a quick timeline on kind of what it looks like on a project timeline. I don't know if we can make this any bigger. You do have a copy of this. I can't even see it, so that's great.
The second page
Well,
is
this-
more zoomed in.
Yeah, but
Yeah. Probably a little bit better. There we go. So at the beginning of a project, and it's not much different from a design build, which is what we're doing out at the 10 site versus a normal lease back contract. Once we issue a notice to proceed, we say, okay, this is the project, we're gonna do this project. And then we're gonna select the architect. They have to look at the hazardous materials, the geotechnical, which is the soil, is the soil safe to put a building on?
Eric,
So,
one
yeah.
quick question. So is this true of the modernization projects as well as new construction?
Yeah, this will be same as a modernization project. We will have to do programming, designing of the building. Now, if we're just doing a modernization of a building. We're not gonna have a lot of programming meetings. We will meet with the site, we'll make sure all the standards are met. Are there anything we need to know about this building? If it's a normal teacher classroom, we'll get feedback on the casework, how the classroom's laid out. We will have some distance standards already established. So it's not like we're designing a brand new building with all these user groups that are using it. That might look a little bit different, but then there'll be schematic design. Then we'll start contractor selection. I'm gonna use just the kind of the one on the right. We'll do estimates and constructability. Community engagement is if it's a big complicated project and it's a new building, we might have a lot of community engagement. If it's just putting in new lights or new fire alarms and we're modernizing classrooms, there's not gonna be a lot of community engagement. It just depends on the project. We'll talk about long lead item procurement. That's where if we know we're gonna be doing work during the summer, we want the contractor to be able to order the items 7 months ahead of time, because there's a thing called a master switchboard for like electrical panels, and we've been hearing it takes like a year to get it. So, and then PG&E, if you're doing like a new service connection, PG&E says, oh, that's 18 months ahead of time. So for new big projects, the lead items are very long. So you have to have a lot of advanced planning. Because you can't have school starting with no power, right? So that's not a good thing. We will have all the construction drawings done. We submit them to DSA. DSA could take 6 months to 7 months to review the drawings. So that's reviewing the drawings, doing back check, and then once the drawings are approved, then we can move forward and start the project. So all that has to be done way ahead of time before we even start a shovel in the ground. So there's a lot of lead time, and the chart on the top is the number of days.
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah, so that's the number of days.
Not hours?
No, I will do hours, right? So on top, a normal project, if it's a normal modernization, a new construction modernization, it's about the same for GSA review time. So you're thinking 480 days. So that's
Before we can actually start.
before you can actually start construction.
So that seems like, the implication of that would seem to be that we're already too late for summer of 2026.
It'd be pretty tight. It'd be pretty tight to do projects. So then what we would want to identify are what are some projects that we can get out the gate that will require minimal DSA review, and we call those quick start projects. Are there any projects that are smaller get rid of some portables, maybe do a prefab building, a folia, or like a TimberQuest project that we've looked at before, so it just depends on what we wanna do. So these are the questions.
TimberQuest would be faster than this?
TimberQuest would be faster, depending if it's a
Folia.
PC, if it's a pre-check building, right? So yeah,
Which part is the pre-check,
the pre-check is where the DSA review,
hundred and eighty days
Yeah.
DSA review?
so that's where you're gonna save time on review, and then you'll save
But
time
how
on.
much does that you save? Because like you were saying, path of travel, all the rest of it, like they still have
They
red
will.
pen, right?
Well,
So how
that's
much
the
of that, how much of the hundred and eighty do you think you saved? The pre-check, so.
depends, so it's so project specific, really is. So,
Did the facilities master plan committee identify any quick start projects?
no,
No, okay.
no. You know, our number one priority, I think, is, it's kind of letting the board is, the bond is passed, it's wonderful, but there's a lot of work that has to be done to get it planned and organized, and once we get the bond planned and organized, and then we know exactly what projects we're gonna press play on, then we can talk about the financing, the scope, the sequencing, because maybe, one school says, you know what? We've got a big camp or something going on in our school, we don't need the project done, well, we're gonna kind of decide that. However, we want to be mindful of cash flow and how it impacts our, like, if the AV rate, Makiko kind of talked about it earlier, but if AV is growing stronger, we might be able to do more bond issuance earlier on in the program, but it's just gonna be based on a multitude of factors. But the idea is to get, the project list kind of identified and solidified, to get the whole program organized, and then you will always, you will always have more projects than you have funding available. And I haven't included anything about state funding. We are eligible from state modernization grant funding and for some new construction funding. That's not part of our revenue model yet, but I will bring that back to us later on. You know, we're eligible for maybe an additional $10 million. The $10 million, that could be an extra project, right? So, and then, the way state funding goes is you get in line for eligibility, and you might not get the money until later on. So you'd be basically paying back the bond program later on, and then you might have money come in 5 or 6 years from now for projects that you already completed in year 3 of your bond program. And so that's an additional revenue source as well.
I have a question for Sandra.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable that Eric has between his time now and the program managers that he is going to hire, that he will have enough bandwidth to do what normally has to happen during the year, plus managing this construction, plus managing the program managers?
Sure, I think we need to build a team, right? He talked about it, an accountant, program manager, perhaps there's another director of program, like we're looking at what that means for us internally. Temporary positions, right?
Yeah.
To get us through.
It's a
lot of work.
It's a huge undertaking.
We only ask the best people to do that.
Thank you.
The salaries for the team that Eric's going to be building, does that get paid out of the bond or is that our general fund?
Out of
The bond.
Yep.
Yeah, can we look at, well, if you have other questions about timeline, cash flow, bond, and then I thought we would look at the last attachment, which kind of goes back to those priority projects that we,
Okay, that's all my question.
yeah. Yes, that one.
So my question here is, as you've been talking, I'm getting the impression that these groupings are going to change completely.
Well, I don't think the first one will change completely.
No, I mean, let's go back to the previous page.
Okay.
Sorry, I just had Marcy put it on this page.
Sorry, yeah. So there we have 4 different groups, right?
Sure.
And my impression is that a lot of them are going to move around.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and I want to remind, and Brent did a pretty good job, is the master plan is a living document. It will change, but these are all the list of the entire master plan projects of the entire district at all 9 sites. So we're gonna have to decide what's our biggest priority. And then we will put together, okay, well, maybe this school doesn't need a TK room. It might be on the list, but we say, no, I don't think we need a TK at that room. Or this school library is perfect. Or they don't need a counseling center, or they don't need this or that. So we will have to put that list together. But these are all the identified needs at all 9 schools, needs and wants. And then we have to make a decision on what's our priority program gonna look like. Because we know that number on the bottom of over 700 million, we only have $350 million to work with. A little bit of remaining measure N. And on this list, there's nothing about the 10 site spend.
And there's nothing on this about middle school.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, there is.
There
It's
is.
in,
Which one?
It's in several, well.
It's in
LASD and
several
campus, it's in several
areas.
places. Well, that leads in my comment, which is that, in my mind, prioritization of what fits into the bond program and sequencing are two
Yes.
different discussions.
Agree.
And so I think we prior board came to a broad consensus around prioritization, 1, 2, 3, in terms of what's most important, next important to fit in.
Yes,
But to me, that doesn't mean that priority group 1, which is all the modernizations, have to be done first.
correct.
And in fact,
But getting that, if hearing that those priorities are still the top 3 priorities, the modernization of classrooms, the moving to middle school, and my brain just,
The 10th site.
and figuring out,
well, that's not the 3 groups. Like the
Yes.
3 groups here were modernization, new projects plus renovation, and then slightly less important new projects plus renovation.
correct,
Because we're gonna run out of money somewhere
Yeah.
between groups 2 and 3 as presented in the document.
correct. But
And then just
then,
didn't talk about the 10th site.
and including some decisions on the 10th site, I think our job is to come back and figure out, once our team is assembled, what is a reasonable starting point, and kind of build that pipeline to bring back to you for some feedback and some discussion. I mean, if we land on and are expert, and between time and resource availability and all of that says that we can do 2 or 3 school modernizations, I think there will be an opinion about which schools get modernized just in that modernization portion first, based on what else is on the plan for those particular schools, right? So to bring back kind of some nitty gritty to you, I think will be helpful.
Well, what I'm hearing, I mean, given that moving 6th grade to the junior high is on our roadmap,
Yes,
and hearing sort of comments around, if you touch a building, you gotta touch the whole building, and kind of if you touch a campus, you're better off if you touch the whole campus. I mean, that suggests to me that we should be looking at the middle schools first, like both the 6th grade changes and the modernizations there, which personally, I think has the additional benefit of every kid who goes through our district, then will see at least some benefit, because otherwise we have, we have 2nd and 3rd graders who, depending on which elementary school they go to, aren't gonna see any benefit out of
Right.
this. If we don't touch the junior highs as quickly as possible.
And lots of needs.
What's that?
Well, I mean, when I think of the master plan, there's so many needs. That's the biggest thing, is prioritizing where the greatest needs. We know our buildings have been touched in 25 years. So they all need roofs, they all need HVAC, they all need lights. Starting January 1st, state of California, another entry code thing. You cannot buy these compact fluorescent tubes anymore. So as these light fixtures fail in all of our classrooms, we've been slowly kind of fixing them. We have done a little bit of retrofits on some of them, but all of our schools have, we have limited resources and unlimited needs. So we're gonna have to really kind of put the pen to the paper and decide what's the priority.
So Sandra, do you want us to go through the items on the next page and talk about, like, and rank them in some way, or like, what do you want us to do about that page? There's another page.
In various.
well, I'm trying to decide if that would be helpful. At this juncture, simply because you all don't have the technical details You know, you may say that, see without my glasses on. The multi-purpose rooms, you know, are a priority, but then our expert may say, frankly, I believe that you should do the modernizations of these campuses in the first phase and the building of the multis in the second phase. So I don't know, I'm a little hesitant. I think hearing from you some priorities like middle school and thinking about all of the middle school needs, or would you want us to bring to you a conversion to sixth grade middle school plan and a full Block and Egan modernization and sixth grade plan to kind of see the difference in the timeline and the cost of those things? Would that be helpful?
Okay. I mean, it would be, I think it would be helpful. I mean, at least for me, I think prioritizing our programming is priority for, like, moving to the middle school model, but, yeah.
I'm sympathetic to Brian's suggestion that we do the middle schools first. But before we do that, sure.
We could,
Can we allocate funds to the middle schools, right, without knowing what's gonna happen with the tenth site? I mean, it seems reasonable to think we have some idea of, you know, at most what we spent on the tenth site. So we could, it seems like, at least, you know, based on the estimates here, the middle school, both locker room and sixth grade classrooms, it's under $40 million. Seems, I would be comfortable saying, let's allocate those 40 million to the
You get
middle
working on those
schools.
projects.
Yeah, and like, it's not like, we can still decide, you know, about the 10th site return.
Sure, and that 40 million would not be required in the first 2 years of the process. Is that correct? Likely? Maybe, maybe not. I'm thinking of your timeline and your,
No, I mean,
you know,
yeah, I mean,
480 days.
I wouldn't be able to spend $40 million in 1 year. Like on those two projects, it might be over the total.
Sorry, that's not including the soft costs.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
but I think irrespective of what we decide about the 10th site, we can still move to the middle school model. Seems that.
Right, but there's a cost associated with it.
Right.
And if the other hand, we put more ECS on that site, then we have to do less work. Well, I don't know. Or do different work on.
Because to me, I'm thinking I want to prioritize our academic program. Sure. Right? More than I want to prioritize. Yeah, rather spend the money on,
That's fine,
yeah,
I'm with you.
yeah.
It seems to me that getting the middle school, as Brian said, getting the
Yeah.
middle schools done allows more students to benefit from it. Right now, I doubt that the seventh graders, current middle school students are going to benefit at all from it. In fact, they may get disrupted totally because of this. So getting that done, I think right now is, I would tend to be at a high level priority. And then
Oh, and I misspoke earlier, so I want to correct myself for the record that with the soft costs, the middle school conversion would, and the music room, it would be like 63 million.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like, I would like to prioritize the middle school model program, not necessarily everything that needs to be done at the middle schools. Right, so like I know, for example, Ethan needs a new music school, music room. But that to me is a separate issue from moving to the sixth grade model.
I think that's what we need to understand,
Yeah.
right, is that.
Like, what are the two
We have
versions?
we have high level conceptual
Sure,
ideas of what the changes to the campuses would be,
correct.
but, you know, sort of Eric's point, right, like, if we end up building new buildings in the back corner of Egan, then I could see. Then, you know, the consultant might come and say, well, if you're gonna do that, because of DSA and the concrete and everything else, you might as well just do all of these modernizations, and maybe we can leave off the music room for phase 2, but
Right.
like, that's what we need to understand, I think, to be able to do the sequencing.
Correct. Agreed.
Stella, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What items did you pick up For your $63 million?
Yeah, that's 6th grade classrooms, locker rooms, music room. At both Egan and Block. And then,
So where does that show up on here?
so if you go down the Block and Egan columns,
Yeah.
you'll see music. And then new classrooms, and then
Music,
locker
there's
rooms.
nothing at Egan.
No, you look in group
Under
3,
new construction.
new construction, yeah, they're all under new construction.
Oh, I see, okay, all right.
Yeah, and then I had to divide by 0.65 to get the hard and soft cost. So that's,
Estimated last spring.
right, based on those estimates.
Yeah.
Which is not nothing. I mean, hell, they need to rebuild 30,000 houses in LA. So
Yeah.
We don't know what they're gonna do.
Right,
Right.
yeah, availability of materials.
And labor.
Cost of Materials and
Yeah.
labor,
Yeah.
given the current administration.
Fortunately, DSA is not involved with that.
Yeah, the other issue is, we're not the only district going up for bonds.
Right.
And so you're gonna have, there'll be competing labor, every other district that's nearby that's going out for bonds. Santa Clara Valley has, how many districts passed bonds?
Oh, I don't have that off the top of my head.
I'm gonna say probably 10, right? I'm gonna just say 10. And
So
so,
say past like
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
Yeah, Cupertino passed another one, so there will be a little bit of pressure on wages, as always, so they'll be competing for all the same contractors and subcontractors. So that's just something we'd be mindful of, so there will be some cost escalation, for sure.
Also DSA approval, right back up in DSA.
Yeah, as DSA has more projects in the pipeline, it takes them, there's a thing called the bin time, it sits in the bin for 3 months before they even look at it, right? So, and when it sits in the bin, sometimes they have to send drawings down to San Diego, the San Diego office will have to review things. Cause the Oakland office gets too busy. So that's another thing about DSA review time.
So I'm actually less concerned about like getting the breakdowns of like, oh, if we do this combo, how much does it cost? I can figure it out. But what I would like to know is what are the quick start projects?
What are the what?
Quick start projects. I would like to know which projects we can't get to for a while. You know, because there's no point in saying it's a priority. Or I mean, that alone is not gonna get it done quicker, right? I wanna know like logistically, what can we actually start sooner? And are there any like, you know, small inexpensive projects that could be just started sooner because they have very little impact on classrooms? For example,
Lunch
the,
canopies.
or outdoor shade.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Where it's like adding something new to the campus. And it's not anywhere near the classroom and it's only 3.4 million in hard costs.
I think shade structures is a good example. If you have a permanent shade structure that's DSA approved, it's PC, pre-checked. So the review time is over the counter. You go in and submit it. DSA is trying to make those a little bit easier and not make you do all these other upgrades at the same time. And we do have a lot of shade structures at our schools. So that's another good example, but we want to review it first. So there's no implications as well. So yeah. I think that's the easiest low hanging one that you could do. Because these tents that we have up are not permanent. They're not gonna last forever. And so if you could get a permanent structure and that when we did the tours and a lot of stakeholder input from parents, that was one thing. Is shade is a very important thing for families. So yeah, we have to be.
I actually like the new outdoor shade over even the lunch canopies because we do have makeshift canopies,
Yeah.
right? So the new outdoor shade is also the cheapest.
But
one
it's
of the
also
cheapest.
possible that those currently installed canopies will have to be removed
Correct.
when we go into work.
Yeah.
I
And
don't,
and will not be.
not
provided.
discuss,
That's
not the
because
stage
of-
structure itself. But I want to make sure that if we're gonna do quick start projects, we're not just picking whatever's cheapest. But I want it to be something that we really want to do.
Well, okay, so I already did some quick back of the envelope calculations, right? And you know, if these numbers are accurate, then we could do the campus modernization with the scope reductions and the middle school conversion and still have a little and build out the 10th site and still have a little left over to like, you know,
But not for.
not for everything, but you could pick a few. Oh, yeah, and not all at once, but that's why the timing matters. Like, what could we start now that's not
But-
gonna,
That's why I think Sandra's idea to come back with middle school's a priority, here's the details of that. Because I think we also need to consider what we're gonna decide to do with the 10th site, because I think that will affect how much of this we can actually do, right? So I would like to see what you proposed or.
It's something like, I mean, something like lunch canopies, even that would be a summer project.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, like in my mind, we've got, you know, sort of a deadline of the end of this school year to try to make decisions so that we can get a shovel in the ground for 2020, summer of 27. And then we've got, you know, a little bit more time to get shovels in the ground for summer of 26 for like the quick stuff, but like that's the timeline.
And if we decide we're gonna do one school's, like if we're gonna build new classrooms, let's say we decide we need to build 4 new classrooms at Block and 4 new classrooms at Deegan, that doesn't need to wait until summer, because that project might take more than a summer, which it will. So you could do that project anytime the campus is operating. It'll be noisy. They would fence it off. We know what area construction is gonna happen, and then you make it happen. So that's a perfect example of where there will be some projects that can't happen during the summer. But if we're gonna just modernize, let's say, the first 4 wings here at Covington, that has to be done during the summer, unless we have a plan to put kids in portables, which I would rather not do.
So I would like to understand the timeline of when we have to make these decisions, because like you're saying, it's already summer 27 before we can break ground on some of the bigger projects. And if we don't make these decisions in a timely manner, it'll be summer 28. I'm trying to. So when do we need to decide? Like, what's the timeline that you need from the input from the board?
Always say sooner the better.
No, but specifically, like seriously.
I wouldn't want to
of course,
wait.
sooner the
Yeah,
better,
I
but-
wouldn't want to wait. I think sometime this spring, probably no later than April. I think we want to get things moving. It's gonna take us a while to get the whole bond program organized. That's why we went out for the RFQ first to get that. That's the number one thing, to get our bond program organized. And then get architects under contract. And once we have the program organized, we decide which projects we want to do. And then we hire the architects to implement those projects. So that for me, I always still want the sooner the better, but we can't do anything until we've got the program somewhat organized. And if we want to do it in a phase one, we want to do these projects, and if we can phase the bond program in 2 phases or 3 phases. Phase 1 are the first 4 years. We plan on doing these projects the first 4 years. And then the next 4 to 6 years, we're gonna do these projects.
So I'm thinking, do we need to schedule like a separate study session or something?
Probably, so we need to hire, the RFQ is due tomorrow. And so we need to get a person hired. I do think it would be helpful to review this quickly to see if this is still accurate, because for us to bring some hypothetical organized bond program to you, it would be nice to know, like, are we on the right track? So originally, the group, yes, we all know that we need to modernize our existing classrooms, so that was a priority. But if you look at the 2 bucket, those were prioritized as A, B, C, D within there. So A being middle school conversion, which was only the 6th grade classrooms and the locker rooms. And then B went to, at the time, multipurpose rooms for Santa Rita and Oak. C was then the music building at Egan. And D was looking at some additional kinder and TK classrooms. Let's not say Santa Rita, Almond and Oak, I believe. Right, so, oh, yeah, thank you. I should have just clicked on my own computer. So if we think about working with the person that we're going to hire to build, it's nice to just have some parameters. And then the third kind of area was all new construction.
Which we don't anticipate getting to with this.
Most likely not, right? So again, this person might say, you know, we think we should do C before B, this makes more sense, but are these generally the projects that should be the priority for this round?
I do agree with them, but I feel like within 2, we should do a little ranking, because we probably will run out of funding somewhere in there. And so, you know, I also agree with Brian about, if we're going into the middle schools, let's just get all the middle school stuff done. I would just
throw the music building in along with the rest of it. And then, it sounds like the kinder TK decision would kind of hinge on enrollment at those grade levels. And so based on current information, I may slightly prefer the multipurpose rooms. That's my ranking.
I mean, for me, these buckets, it's part of the old. board,
Yeah,
so
still
it's
stand.
really still stand for me. But the middle school, looking at bucket number 2, the middle school model is high priority for me.
Yeah.
I really want to see how we can make that happen. And whatever that takes, and then, you know, definitely the multi-purpose rooms for some of our elementary campuses. The music building, I don't really know how big a priority that is for me, but if we're doing all the junior high stuff together, then we do it together. But if we're gonna start running out of money in bucket 2, then it's, I don't know, it's between C and D for me, like what I would sacrifice.
So I have a question for, on this slide, on that slide, you have modernization 1. Does that correspond to what we call group 1?
Group one on
Well, group 1 also includes this existing wing renovations. That is not part of,
Say that again?
so if you're looking at the budget,
Yeah.
it's, the last line in group 1 is existing wing renovations. I think that is not part of the rest of it. Because those other things are called out individually in group 1. And then existing ring renovations, this is the other thing that costs like nearly $90 million on its own, but that's not part of it.
Yeah, is that right? Is that, I was confused about that.
Like bathrooms, other auxiliary buildings, things like that along the list. It's a lot of kind of catching all things.
Yeah.
Again, that could be ADA upgrades around the building. Which isn't specifically called out, but when we build the program, we're going to put some contingencies for that.
Oh, yeah, Eric, because you said that you guys did revise the scope of some of these, is there an updated version of this that you could share?
That's the one that's in the master plan, and then the thermometer, I think that you had, that was done after the master plan was already done. So we took the master.
These
plan-
are the updated numbers.
Correct, that's the most updated.
Okay, but do you
No,
have a version that
Not
looks like
the,
this?
not the updated numbers, that's the updated scope,
The scope.
the board decided, hey, these are the buckets. So we took the master plan. And then the board, we kind of had I guess, an action. We kind of went around and talked about these buckets, what would it look like? But that was based on the master plan, and that's where we started reducing some scope to, decide what's feasible. Like in our little bucket, in our little thermometer, how many projects could we accomplish with $150 million? It's all gonna be dependent on what we spend on the Penn side as well.
Okay, I guess I would really like to know what got included in the campus modernization projects that brought the cost down to 83.3 versus this budget document where it added up to
I think when I was
like
talking,
96.9-ish.
yeah, I think we reduced some of the technology scope
Uh-huh,
and some of the work done at Springer as well.
some of the technology scope and some of the work done at
We can definitely
Springer.
bring that back as well, because I think I know we're gonna have
There was
another
fewer.
discussion about those.
Buildings that needed to be done than originally
Oh,
budgeted
fewer
for, I
buildings.
believe.
Oh, okay, fewer buildings.
In terms of the existing buckets here, like the one thing that I'm not sure if I still agree with, based on feedback that I got as I was talking to people during the bond campaign, is that, so if we don't get to 3A, which is new classrooms at Gardner Bullis.
Yeah.
What I want to make sure, what I'm slightly concerned about is a scenario where Gardner Bullis ends up being the only school with classrooms in portables for the next 15 years.
Sure.
Because most of our other campuses, I mean, we have portables on all of our campuses, they're all getting used. But given our current enrollment, we could fit our current, like, every teacher could have a permanent classroom
Correct,
if they wanted
but
to,
not at Gardner.
except at Gardner
Yeah.
Bullis. And so that's the one thing that's the only thing that I'm sort of inclined to maybe
So
rethink
stuff.
and might result in a reshifting. Because that doesn't
That's
seem
fair.
quite right.
And I think, we're still looking closely at and we'll have hopefully current numbers as of tomorrow or by the end of this week about what our TK registration is looking like. And I know this is planning much more long-term than we're planning for next year, but I think statewide, we're not seeing at this point in time, the numbers of TK mirroring the kinder numbers for whatever reason. And will that come in the future? Possibly, perhaps, but does that mean that it's maybe less of a priority right now for us? So we're looking at that closely too. Just if you wanted to shift something from 2 to 3.
I have a small nit to pick here, and that's lunch canopies at Gardner Bullis. This will be the 4th one in my time. And this one apparently is gonna cost $750,000. It seems like a lot.
Gold plated.
Thanks.
Kidding.
Bear proof. Pound?
It's a bear proof.
Bear proof. Lunch canopy.
But that's a DSA issue.
No. Well,
No, it is.
no, it need not be. I'm sure the DSA approved lunch canopies out there. Pre-approved.
Not to this point. In the future, yes.
You mean for a smaller cost?
If they're DSA approved buildings, then I'm pretty sure that you can find a DSA approved lunch canopy.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Eric
They-
indicated
they-
that we could, but you were saying this will be the 4th canopy, but. None of them were DSA approved.
That is a point that I object to. Because
Did you pay for one of them?
we did pay for one that I thought was exempt from DSA, but that's another story. Another history.
What should our campuses, so the campuses listed under libraries, Oak, Loyola, Santa Rita, Springer, those are the only 4 that don't have permanent building, libraries and permanent buildings. Cause I mean, I don't know, I do believe in music programs, I do. But they kind of have a building, and I remember when my daughter was at Almond, I think Almond was the last campus to get a building for their library. And I remember that was kind of an issue with the other campuses.
I think Eric has his work cut out. Doesn't he?
Yeah.
There's none.
He has a lot of minefields to step around. And, I know he's looking forward to this.
So we will, and hopefully in short term, hire someone to help us get going in more, like real actual terms. We will generally use these priorities, but understand that there might be some changes to those by preference on the board or by just reality of whether it's materials, labor, or what have you. And work in short order to bring you some information of how we're gonna get started. Does that feel reasonable? You've done this before, I'm just.
I mean, I think once we have the project list identified and everybody's in agreement, and then also the timing. What are our priorities? And then we have the list of projects, which ones we want to do first, and then that we can get the bond program started. I do feel like a phase 1 and phase 2 is a good approach.
Yeah.
It'll help us with the cash flow as well, and once we have that organized, it's gonna be much easier to implement.
Well, just to clarify, I'm not quite sure what you mean by phase 1 and phase 2, but it seems that we need to probably have at least 4 different phases, right? Because you're gonna get 4 different chunks of money.
Well, I mean, the issuance is just timing of when we are issuing bonds for cash, but I just think of like.
Chunks of projects.
Yeah, like a list of projects, like which ones do we wanna, if we have the bond program, we say it's gonna be an 8-year bond program. The first phase is gonna be the first 4 years. What's our first 4 years of projects? What's the next 4 years of projects? That's what I think of just phase. Like, what do we want to accomplish?
Does that mean that we're gonna run out of money at the end of it? Because we're gonna, oh no, I'm sorry, take that back, never mind.
I guess the phases don't need to correspond with.
Yeah.
I just had a comment for Brian, just FYI, the kinder TK classrooms were gonna cost about 20 million, and then the Gardner Bullis classrooms also about 20 million. Just so, you know, they are interchangeable.
So they still trade off with big. And the other comment I would make is, I do want to make sure that we're conscious of giving the community time to react to the decision.
Sure.
So.
I think that's where perhaps a phase 1 and phase 2 is also helpful, that we don't just list, here are all the projects we're gonna get done, but that there's an expectation that whatever it might be, new classrooms are going to be in phase 2, which isn't gonna happen for 4 or 5 years.
Is it possible in phase 1 to touch all of our campuses? Because I can understand parents saying like, well, like my school is in phase 2, and by the time you get to phase 2, you're gonna run out of money. So we could at least touch all the campuses. I mean, I don't know.
I think this is where some of those
Quick start.
smaller projects potentially come up.
Eric, does this include soft costs?
Yes.
No, only the bottom, but like, so you see how at the bottom it says total 474, and then there's the yellow box that says 708. 708 includes the soft costs, but all the individual numbers in here do not. So you have to divide them all by 0.65.
The bottom number on the bottom right, the 708 is hard copy and soft cost. So the bottom right column.
So except for the bottom number, no soft costs.
Yeah, and then a bigger, more complicated project, you're gonna have more architects, more engineers, more inspections, more soft costs could be higher. Smaller, less complicated projects, less soft costs.
Further comments? Do you guys feel like you have enough direction?
I feel great about it.
Okay, yes. And then board members we'll all just plan on being very flexible. We need to schedule another big study session.
For sure. Very exciting.
Thank you, Mickey.
Schedule next session. If we have to sort of get this done by April.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
All right, are we done with this agenda item?
We sure are.
All right, let's move on to board and administration comments. Thank you. Would you like to?
Everybody's packing up.
Eric, anything else?
Thank you.
Please?
Oh, yeah, I do want to, I want to acknowledge Leilani and Elizabeth at the business office. Elizabeth, her and I were back and forth with the county to work to get the AB 1200 disclosure approved by the county. And then Leilani has been working really hard to update our salary schedules. She'll be working on the teachers' rate will be at the end of the month, at the end of February. So it'll go on their February 28th payroll check. And then the retro payment will be on March 10th for all the teachers going back to July 1st. If every employee that's a teacher has to be manually entered by Leilani, our payroll technician. So it's a lot of work. She was here until 6+ tonight working. So I want to acknowledge both Leilani and Elizabeth for working really hard to get for the help the teachers with the salary increase.
So,
Yes, I really enjoyed the Almond site visit and seeing the teachers at work and the students engaged in their learning. And I also attended a new trustee training that was led by Shali, or one of the panels moderated by Shali. And I got some good ideas there, and I'd be curious to hear sort of like thoughts from the rest of the board regarding maybe like a board buddy system where each of us is assigned maybe a couple of schools where we try to get to know that community better, and possible like listening sessions or office hours. Maybe some of you already do that, but I'd kind of like to learn more about how we could execute that.
we should share what we learned with Sandra, because I like the board buddy system. Sorry, it's not my turn yet.
I pretty much gonna echo Stella on the new trustee orientation and I think I've been to all the school visits that we did in the last week, and I very much appreciate staff and the school staff taking the time, and it's been very informative, so.
When I talked to Governor Newsom last week.
Nothing in particular. Jessica and I have done board office hours in the past. Be happy to chat with lessons learned. Doing.
And I really enjoyed the Egan site visit and ditto about the new trustee training. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming. It speaks a lot of you that you would want to go to a training on a Saturday morning. But I appreciate it. And I think our school district is in good hands. And with that, we are adjourned.